There are seasons in life when nothing dramatic seems to happen. No major crisis, no obvious turning point. And yet, inside, something feels unsettled. The outer world keeps moving the same way it always has, but inwardly, everything slows down, grows heavier, goes deeper. Pisces often steps into moments like this without realizing it right away. It starts as a quiet sense that you are standing in front of something meaningful. You can't name it yet. You don't fully understand it. But somehow, you know it's close. This time, the message doesn't arrive to shake your life apart. It comes to bring clarity, to ask you to pause and listen inward, instead of drifting forward on old habits and familiar patterns. Before that message fully takes shape, the inner world of Pisces has already begun to speak in its own subtle way. And it's those quiet signs, the ones that don't demand attention, that gently lead us into the first chapter of today's story. There are periods in life when nothing major seems to be happening for Pisces. Life continues along its familiar rhythm. Work, relationships, evenings repeating themselves, much like the days before. But inside, something feels different. A feeling that's hard to name begins to surface. Not clear, not loud, just a subtle disturbance, like the surface of water gently rippling, without any strong wind passing through. Sleep doesn't feel as deep as it once did. The body is tired, yet the mind stays awake. Thoughts don't race. They circle quietly. Old questions return. Memories you thought had settled rise to the surface again, more vivid than before. Pisces may wonder why the mind feels so occupied when everything on the outside seems just fine. But that very state is what deserves attention. For Pisces, the inner world is always the first place where life is felt. When something begins to shift inside, it's rarely driven by fear or unnecessary worry. It's more like a door slowly opening, not rushed, not forced, just wide enough to let light in, creating space for awareness, to observe itself. You may sense, in a vague and quiet way, that something is approaching, not in a dramatic sense, not a major upheaval, just the feeling that a certain piece of your life is about to settle back into its proper place. And before that moment arrives, the mind often needs time to adjust. Many Pisces become more sensitive during this phase, more touched by words that seem small, more aware of details once easily overlooked. A song that plays at the right moment, a brief conversation that leaves a lasting echo, a glance that makes you pause for a few seconds. None of this is random, yet none of it needs a fixed meaning either. This is a time of receptivity for Pisces, not toward outside information, but toward inner signals. The body and the spirit speak together, in a language uniquely their own. No urgency, no alarm, just a soft whisper, suggesting that it's time to listen more deeply. You may not yet understand what you are preparing for, and you don't need to. Every awakening begins with uncertainty, like dawn, when it's no longer night, but not quite day either. That in-between moment often slows people down, invites reflection, and allows them to see themselves more clearly. Pisces is accustomed to sensing others, but this phase gently turns your attention inward. The questions that arise aren't meant to be answered right away. They're meant to invite honesty. What has been draining your energy? What you've endured for far too long? What you keep saying is fine, even though, deep down, it isn't. There is nothing wrong with feeling slightly unsettled during this time. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your sensitivity is functioning exactly as it should, like an inner compass, quietly recalibrating its direction. Slow, silent, yet remarkably precise. And before any news truly arrives, These sensations become your first guide. They don't ask you to act immediately. They only ask you to stay with yourself a little longer, to listen a little more closely, so that when the message does come, in whatever form it takes, you can receive it with greater clarity and a deeper sense of maturity than ever before. When that information touches the life of Pisces, it rarely knocks in a polite way. No warning, no waiting for you to be ready. It arrives in the middle of ordinary moments, maybe when you are at your busiest, or when you believe things have finally settled. That shift in rhythm can stop you for a few seconds, as if reality has been gently nudged off its familiar course. Not every important message arrives clearly defined. Sometimes it's just a passing remark, a brief email, an unexpected meeting that wasn't part of the plan. At times, the news comes through someone else, carrying a perspective you were never prepared to receive. And in that first instant, the most common feeling isn't happiness or sadness, but confusion. Pisces is used to imagining possibilities ahead of time. You run through different outcomes, different scenarios, so that if something happens, you won't be completely caught off guard. But this time, the message slips past every layer of defense. It doesn't align with any expectation you created. And that misalignment is exactly what makes it impossible to ignore. The first instinct may be to delay facing it, to tell yourself you'll think about it later, that now isn't the right moment. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, you know something has already shifted. An old piece no longer rests where it once belonged. Even if you continue your daily routines as usual, that awareness follows quietly behind you. This news doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't need to be dramatic. What gives it weight is the way it touches a place you deliberately avoided looking at. It might reveal a truth about a relationship. It might show you that a path you've been walking no longer fits who you are. Or it may simply bring the realization that you are no longer the person you were years ago. Pisces is often gentle with others, yet inwardly demanding of yourself, in very subtle ways. You endure longer than necessary. You accept situations that no longer bring life to you, because they feel familiar, because they feel safe. This time, the message acts like a mirror, placed directly in front of you. No judgment, no accusation, just a reflection of what is. That moment may leave you feeling unprepared, like being pulled out of familiar waters where you've been swimming for a long time. And yet, right there, a question begins to take shape. If I keep going the same way, what follows? And if I allow myself to change, what do I truly lose? No one is asking Pisces to decide immediately. This message doesn't arrive to force action. It arrives to bring clarity, to make it impossible to say that you didn't know. Once light has reached a certain place, turning away becomes far more difficult. At this stage, honesty with yourself matters more than any response from the outside world. You may choose silence. You may need time. But within you, a truth has already been named. And regardless of how you respond, the process of awakening has begun. From here, Pisces gradually understands that the real change isn't in the news itself, but in how you reassess your values, your boundaries, and your place within the story. And that is where the next part unfolds. Deeper, clearer, and more honest than before. After the initial moment passes and everything slowly settles, Pisces begins to realize that what truly shook you wasn't the content of the message itself. The strongest echo comes from somewhere deeper. It rises from the way you responded, from emotions that surfaced. Even you didn't expect to feel. A vague sense of discomfort, a quiet mismatch between what you've long believed and what you've just come to see. There is a very personal place inside every Pisces, a place where unspoken values are held, where boundaries remain gentle yet defined, and where choices have been suspended for many different reasons. When this message arrives, it touches that exact place, not with force, but with precision, like a fingertip resting on a small fracture, barely visible, yet impossible to ignore. At this point, Pisces may feel unsettled about yourself, not because you don't understand what's happening, but because you're beginning to see yourself more clearly. You notice what you've accepted for far too long, the compromises once considered necessary, the boundaries quietly blurred, to keep others comfortable. And within that realization, there's a very soft sadness, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just enough to make you pause. What's being awakened isn't fear. It's a sense of self-respect that's been resting quietly for a long time. Not an inflated ego, but a deep awareness that you deserve a more honest way of living. You begin asking questions, not of the world, but of yourself. What am I holding on to? And does it still belong to who I am now? Pisces often settles for a state of just enough. Not truly happy, but not deeply hurt either. A quiet comfort zone where you know how to keep things from falling apart. But once this point of awakening is reached, remaining in that space becomes difficult. Not because circumstances demand it, but because something within you has shifted. You may not be ready to act yet, and that is completely okay. Awakening doesn't require immediate bold moves. Sometimes it's simply the moment. You stop deceiving yourself. You no longer label exhaustion as patience. You no longer mistake silence for peace. You no longer confuse self-sacrifice with self-erasure. At the deepest level, what's happening is a recalibration, like a compass needle, slowly turning toward true north. Unhurried, soundless, yet unmistakably decisive. Pisces begins to sense more clearly where your limits truly are, what you can no longer continue giving, and which values should never again be negotiated. This phase may feel slightly lonely, not because you've been left behind, but because you're stepping out of old patterns. When someone changes from within, the world around them often needs time to catch up. And in that space between, quiet becomes inevitable. Yet within that quiet, Pisces reaches a deeply important truth. You don't need to live in a state of just okay to be accepted. Your emotions carry meaning. Choosing a new direction doesn't signal failure, but maturity. What awakens this time is neither loud nor performative. It's like a small lamp being turned on inside a dark room. It doesn't transform everything at once, but it reveals where you're standing. And from that light, the next steps slowly come into view in a way that feels uniquely and unmistakably Pisces. There are moments in life that don't require long explanations. They arrive when everything inside has quietly ripened. Not too early, not too late. And this time, the message reaches Pisces in exactly that kind of moment. Not because you asked for it, not because you went looking for it, simply because you've traveled far enough to understand it differently than before. Over a long stretch of time, Pisces has learned how to hold yourself together, not revealing too much, not complaining. You chose silence as a way to maintain balance. You chose to keep going as a way to protect what felt fragile. But every form of endurance has its natural limit. When that boundary is finally touched, life tends to send a very clear signal, even if its form appears simple. What makes this moment significant is not what's happening around you, but the strength that is formed within you. You no longer see the world through borrowed hope or vague optimism. You begin to recognize what is genuinely yours and what expectations you once carried for others. And once that distinction becomes clear, anything that no longer fits naturally reveals itself. The Pisces you are now doesn't easily believe in empty promises anymore, even when they're spoken with good intentions. You observe more. You listen more carefully. And most importantly, you feel yourself more deeply. This clarity doesn't make you cold. It makes you more honest with what is truly present. The message that appears now acts like a milestone, marking the completion of an old cycle. There's no need to name that chapter. It's enough to know that you are no longer the person you were during that time. What once made you hesitate, what once kept you staying, even when it no longer felt right, no longer holds the same grip. You may notice that your understanding of connection has shifted. Staying is no longer your measure of love. Enduring is no longer proof of your worth. You understand now that maturity sometimes means having the courage to face what isn't working rather than trying to make it more comfortable. That's why this news doesn't arrive to shock you. It arrives to confirm something you've sensed for a long time, like a gentle period placed at the end of a story that has already lasted long enough. Not painful, not dramatic, but necessary. Pisces enters this phase with a very different kind of steadiness. Not loud confidence, but a clearer understanding of yourself. You no longer need reasons to justify your feelings. You no longer try to convince yourself that everything will fix itself. If you simply keep waiting, the appearance of this message reflects something essential, that you are ready to look at reality without covering it with beautiful illusions. You allow yourself to name what is happening, even if the words feel uncomfortable. And when someone is mature enough to do that, life often responds with clarity, not to lead you, but to walk beside you, not to choose for you, but to remind you that you are fully capable of choosing what comes next. This is not an ending, and it is not yet a beginning. It is a moment of transition where Pisces stands between two breaths, one rhythm quietly closing, another slowly forming. And within that pause, the true meaning of this message begins to surface in a way that feels personal, deep, and exactly aligned with who you are right now. After everything has been named, in its own quiet way, another kind of movement begins to take shape. Not loud, no announcements, just a very subtle shift in how Pisces speaks to yourself. You start to notice that you no longer need to explain so much. You no longer feel the need to prove your kindness by placing yourself last every time. The softness is still there, but it is no longer a reason to ignore what you truly need. Pisces begins to learn a very delicate lesson, the lesson of giving with intention. Before, you opened your heart easily, believing that empathy alone would eventually create balance. Now, you understand that empathy does not mean abandoning boundaries. Kindness does not require depletion, and love does not ask you to trade away your inner peace. There is a very quiet moment when you realize you have waited far too long to be understood, not because others were careless, but because you never clearly named what you needed. When this awareness arrives, you don't blame anyone. You simply smile, gently, as if you finally understand why you felt so exhausted for so long. That waiting slowly gives way to a different choice. The choice to understand yourself first. This awakening does not turn Pisces into someone hardened. It makes you clearer, clear in how you say no. When something no longer feels right, clear in choosing whether to stay or to walk away, clear in recognizing the difference between compassion and self-erasure. You no longer feel guilty for prioritizing yourself. You no longer label yourself selfish for needing space to breathe. Gradually, you sense a new kind of energy forming, not impulsive motivation, but a steadiness that rises from within. You begin to trust that the path meant for you does not need universal approval. Some paths are recognized only by your soul, and if you don't walk them, no one else can live that life for you. Pisces also learns to accept that pleasing everyone is impossible. You once saw harmony as the ultimate goal. Now, you understand that true harmony begins inside. When you are honest with your emotions, the world around you adjusts in its own way. Not quickly, not perfectly, but truthfully. During this phase, you may choose to slow down, to choose less, to choose connections that nourish you rather than ones sustained by habit alone. You realize that time and energy are precious resources, and you have the right to decide who receives them and what they are given to. This choice does not require long explanations. It only needs to feel right. The strength of Pisces now is not found in grand gestures. It lives in small decisions repeated each day. Choosing to listen to your body when it grows tired, choosing honesty when something feels off, choosing to stop when a path no longer fits. Each of these choices is a quiet step forward, but a lasting one. There may be moments when you sense that others see you differently, less predictable, less willing to give endlessly. But in return, you feel closer to yourself than ever before. And that closeness creates a deep sense of safety, the kind you once searched for outside yourself. This awakening makes no promises about what comes next. It simply opens a new inner space, a place where you are allowed to live in your own rhythm, a place where you don't need permission to become a more mature version of who you already are. And from that space, the next choices begin to appear naturally, clearly, and honestly, in a way that feels uniquely and unmistakably Pisces. At this point, when every layer of turbulence has finally settled, Pisces may come to recognize something very simple, that the initial feeling of not being ready was never a sign of weakness. It was a natural response of a soul standing at the edge of a new threshold. No one ever feels fully prepared before moments of meaningful change. Only after we are already standing inside them do we realize we carried far more strength than we believed. This message did not arrive to throw your life off balance. It came as a final touch, gentle yet precise, guiding you back to a position that truly fits who you are now, not a place assigned by others, not a role you once held to keep everything stable, but a place where you can stand steady without bracing yourself. Pisces has traveled a long road to reach this point, a journey without spectacle, without public recognition, measured not by major achievements, but by the times you chose silence, overreaction, compassion, over-withdrawal, and perseverance. Even when the path ahead wasn't clearly visible, none of that disappeared. It accumulated quietly, forming a solid foundation strong enough for you to step into a new phase without losing your essence. What matters now is not what you do next, but whether you allow yourself to release old images, to let go of the stories you once told yourself, to feel safe, to release the reasons that kept you in places that no longer nourished you, to loosen your grip on beautiful illusions that no longer match Your inner growth, this letting go, is not denial. It is liberation. When you stop trying to be the version of yourself that pleases everyone, a new space opens, a space of honesty. There, you don't need to over-explain your emotions. You don't need to prove that you deserve respect. You simply show up with the clarity and softness shaped by time. Pisces may notice that life begins to move more slowly, yet more deeply, with fewer expectations, but more genuine connection. You no longer search outward for confirmation of your worth. Instead, you listen to subtle feedback from within, a quiet sense of certainty. When a choice is right, a lightness that comes from no longer forcing yourself to fit. The final message of this journey is neither a warning nor a promise about the future. It is simply a reminder that you have lived enough to know what no longer belongs to you, clear enough to face the truths that ask for recognition, and gentle enough with yourself to avoid turning growth into a battle. From here forward, life for Pisces may not become easier in the conventional sense, but it will become more real. And that realism brings a very different kind of peace. The peace of someone who no longer runs from emotion, who no longer lives in temporary arrangements, who no longer waits for another version of themselves to begin living fully. If there is one thing to remember, it is this: you did not arrive here by luck or coincidence. You arrived because you were brave enough to feel, patient enough to move through, and honest enough to stop turning away from yourself. That message was only the doorway. Whether you step through and at what pace remains your choice. And when you allow yourself to stand in the right place, the next chapter of life no longer needs to rush. It unfolds in its own rhythm, slowly, clearly, and truthfully, just like the Pisces you are right now.